Hello, my name is Diane Wagner, and I'm one of the lucky people that gets to work here at Vesterheim along with Lorraine Gilbertson and Lauren Johnson, Isaiah Solheim, who is our photographer today. Just a little reminder that the afternoon Heritage Park tour will begin immediately following the gallery talk. So if you're interested in visiting the houses and the buildings outside, just go to the admissions desk to begin that. So, on behalf of everyone here at Vesterheim, welcome. We are very pleased that you're joining us today to celebrate the opening of this fabulous new exhibit, Leading with Our Hearts, Nordic, Sámi, and Ojibwe Designs from Nature. This exhibit includes traditional and contemporary works by 6 fabulous artists who have ties to the Arrowhead region of northern Minnesota. This exhibit was made possible by a generous gift to the Vesterheim Annual Fund in loving memory of Floy Anderson Sowie by her daughters, 3 of them right in the corner there, Sonia Stoffaker, Bonnie Sowie, and Alison Martin. Alison, would you like to come up and just say a few words about your mom?
I always like to talk about my mother. She was very dear to me. She was born October 16th, 1925, and she died November 14th, 1922. She was 97 years young. Both of her parents were of Norwegian descent, living in the kind of northwestern part of Wisconsin. She grew up in a modest home raised by her mother in Hawkins, Wisconsin, surrounded in the love of her mother and all of her older siblings. Handwork, as Mom called it, that's what she always called it, handwork, was an expectation in which each individual took a lot of pride. Mom did a great deal of knitting and sewing with a smattering of crochet, embroidery, and hardanger. Hardanger was the last handwork she learned. She took lessons with me and was delighted to be able to do this most Norwegian of handwork. All of us siblings, plus 19 grandchildren, have Christmas stockings she knit. I have transcribed her pattern, and we continue to knit this tradition, memories, and love. It is very fitting that our family supported this exhibit in our mother's name. We are grateful to Vesterheim and the artist whose work is exhibited to show this world such beautiful and loving work.
Thank you.
Leading with Our Hearts was created for and first shown at the Nordic Center in Duluth, and we are excited to have the exhibit here at Vesterheim. I want to thank the Sámi Cultural Center of North America in Duluth and the American Swedish Institute in Minneapolis for lending items for the exhibit. Of course, thank you to the artists for lending items, and also some owners lent pieces for us. The guest curators for the exhibition are Wendy Savage and Alison Aune. And they are participating artists as well, along with Laurel Sanders and Marlene Wisery. Thank you for coming all the way from Duluth. And welcome. And so now the artists will leave this gallery walk. We'll start here, and then a little bit later we will pick up our chairs and head a little bit toward that other side of the room. Alison.
Wendy. Yeah, I get to go first. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Wendy Savage. I live in Duluth, but I'm an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Reservation. I was also one of the first art teachers that was there, and I come from a family of artists. Everybody knows the Savage clan. Mm-hmm. So I guess I wasn't here, but I'll start over here with the skirts that I've made, and this was one that was in a show at the Nordic Center, and this is about the Lac LaCroix horses. If you don't know anything about that, the Chippewas had horses here before the Spaniards had horses. And so they've studied that, and we are now fortunate enough that they've interbred these horses to keep them alive, and the Fond du Lac Reservation now has at least 2 of the Lac LaCroix horses there on a farm with the Wises. This is my baby sister's skirt that she had ordered the skirt, and it came the complete wrong size. I happened to be in New York, She ripped it all apart, ran upstairs like a true woman, grabbed a skirt and remade it and resewed it all on there. This one wasn't in the show. This is the latest piece that I've done, and this was in a fashion show that I did at the Tweed Museum of Art. This is the classic ribbon work, ribbon applique work that the Ho-Chunk or the Winnebago people completely mastered. And I'm trying to bring it back closer to the area because it was done in the Great Lakes area also, but they're not doing it as much. And it takes a lot of extra work. And this is a panel, and you can see that the skirt goes all the way around. And this is a panel here too, but this is the horsehair, and it has actual horsehair on it. I call myself the queen of embellishment because I just love embellishing over and over. And some of these beads on here are like 25 years old because they've just been upstairs in my sewing room hiding and collecting. This piece is the first one that I actually did in like 1985. Yes, I'm that old. And this one is all hand sewn on this one. And then for a show at Tweed Museum of Art, I made this bag to match it. Finally, I made that bag. And then this is my work over here, some beadwork that I did. Read the cards. This is an old bag that was done at Grand Portage from a dear friend, Marcy McIntyre. Her grandmother invented that style, and all the women in Grand Portage would wear this on their belts to hold their tobacco, is what they did. The jingle dresses, and this is the purse that my sister made to match her outfit, and she hasn't done any beadwork in the last 20 or so years. And every time I try and get her to do a piece for a show, she said no, but guess what? This year, she's making an entire beaded belt. So I knew she'd come back to it. So the jingle dresses that are here are done by Chima Ingan, and he is a Fond du Lac enrolled member, and he's married to my niece. So I get to do anything I want and make him do whatever I want. So this is the matching women and his daughter's dress that they made. And then over here, what he's most famous for is this is when she was little, his little daughter's applique vest. He has done a lot of applique vests for many, many different people. And he also was the chief of police for the Fond du Lac Reservation for 20 years. And when Alison and I did one of our first shows, I invited him to be in the show, and he made us an entire regalia outfit of a man's vest and breechcloths just for our show. So we're very lucky. And what he's doing now, he'll still do that on commission, but he's doing more things like this. These are his tights that I wore. He comes up and he makes these designs, and he's pressing them onto clothes, and this is what he's selling now. They have 5 children, and this is what he does full time. So that's his work. And then Alison wants me to talk about the strap dress. The strap dress over here is a real classic dress from like the 1850s that was really popular. First it was done out of hide, hand-tanned hide, but then during the fur trade, when those beautiful wool blankets and cloth came, you better believe it, they started using that. So, and if you know that it's in the museum, Historical Society in Duluth, the Eastman Johnson paintings. He has actually painted women from Grand Portage and Fond du Lac wearing these historical dresses, and they also have that dress that Eastman Johnson did that famous painting of Minnehaha in, and it's all wool. So this dress is basically just a rectangle. There wasn't anything fashionable about it, whatever. It's just a rectangle. It's got straps here, and this is removable sleeves because, like today, in the morning it's cool. Well, by 11 o'clock you're hot, so those sleeves you would take off. And it also had leggings, and this has become popular. The jingle dresses and the ribbon skirts are really, really popular. All across the United States, at any powwow, you'll see them wearing. Well, what now people want is the strap dress. So with any luck, if they twist my arm and pay me enough, I'm going to be doing a workshop on the ribbon dresses. So, and then this is Alison. This is what inspired. Alison's going to talk to you about this one next. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Alison.
Thank you, Wendy.
Hello, everybody. Wow. We did not know so many people would be here. This is great. So the title of the show, Leading with Our Hearts. Melissa here is in her jingle dress, and you can see the jingle dress. And they're very heavy. What would you say, 50 pounds, 30 pounds? I mean, they're heavy.
They're
And-
at least 30 pounds.
And I think most of you know what jingles are made out of. Wendy?
Snuff can lids. And yeah, because they used to save every piece of metal. And also, if you're old enough, you remember the Prince Albert that came in that metal can? They also used to make smaller jingles out of that. But nowadays, instead of having the snuff can lids nowadays are plastic. But there are places that you can still order by the hundreds and get your jingles.
Get your jingles here. Okay. Well, Melissa Walls was on a television show in Sweden called Alt för Sverige. I think you know Alt för Norge. And she went over there. She's Ojibwe with Swedish roots. She didn't win, but she met someone very special. She met the sound producer. And he actually made the film that will be on later today because they got married and now he lives in Minnesota. But I read a story about Melissa when she went to Sweden and they gave her her folkdräkt. So there she has just the halsband. You can see that kind of handkerchief around. It's actually just like that one, but it's in white. And they gave her, in Norwegian you'd say solja, in Swedish it's folkdräkt silver. And when they handed her that pin that has a heart on it, the painting around the corner has the big heart, that pin, they told her, we lead with our hearts. And she received the pin and she said, that's what we say in Ojibwe. And I thought, that's what we're going to name this show, Wendy. We lead with our hearts. So I didn't know Melissa at the time, but I sent her a little email and I said, Melissa, we're putting a show together. Would you come and pose for me? And would you bring a jingle dress and a folkdräkt? And she was wondering, how is she going to wear both at once? So we did not have her wear both at once, but she has some of the folkdräkt, the silver, the scarf, some of the weaving on the bag, and then the two purple borders are from her shawl, the patterns on her shawl, and then more of the Swedish band weaving is around the edges. So there's Melissa, and across from Melissa, behind these people, and don't break your neck turning around, but that is my granddaughter, Rowan. And that was a little midsummer painting. And I brought back a folkdräkt from Rättvik, Sweden. Our ancestry is not from Rättvik, they're from Falun. I don't like that folkdräkt. So sort of what the Bunad police have going on in Norway, it's happening in Sweden too. Can we mix and match? So I mixed and matched. Don't tell. Anyway, there she is, and she's got her little skjolveska, her little bag, and then I made up that shirt is a pattern that is very popular in Dalarna, Sweden. And you're going to see it on one of the tiny little bonnets under the case. And then the side borders, the blue and white motif, you may recognize that. They're on the side borders around that mandala with my daughter Linnea. And I think they're on the borders around the heart as you came in. Does anyone get Siljan's knäckebröd? That's the wrapping paper from the crisp bread. So it's old patterns, it's new patterns, it's new ways of putting things together to honor the ancestors and to look at some of these patterns as having symbolic meaning. It's patterns of nature, often medicinal plants. We've got strawberries over here, the heartberry. You have all sorts of beauty from nature, which leads us to Marlene. And the Sámi.
Hi. Gee, it's wonderful to be back at the Vesterheim. I was here a few years ago, if you remember the Sami Reindeer People of Alaska exhibit. Any of you remember that? Well, the Sami Cultural Center of North America were the originators of that exhibit, and we were happy to exhibit it here. And I'm currently the chair of the Sámi Cultural Center in Duluth, Minnesota, where we have been for 10 years occupying a modest space in the lakeside neighborhood of Duluth. And we have provided the cradle board, or gita, on the other side of the panel, and Laurel is going to talk a little bit about that. I live on the north shore of Lake Superior, and so on that rocky and rugged shoreline, I have an opportunity to see a lot of natural objects and so on. So my work in the exhibit is kind of a contemporary contribution to the patterns and the nature theme of the exhibit. The work is digital photographs that are manipulated, and if you have a chance to look at them carefully, you might find interesting little bugs in them, or funny little gnomes, or whatever, because when you repeat the patterns of nature, you get other patterns. So I've repeated them and then repeated them again in most of these images, so that you are getting the benefit of the patterns from our hearts in a number of different ways. The piece, the green piece on the lower left there, is a homage to my paternal grandmother, who was from Sámi land, or Sámi, and her family had reindeer as domestic farm animals. Not everybody there actually herded reindeer, but they were animals that were kept more like a cow would be, or something, on somebody's farm. And the one on the lower right has incorporated some other pieces of color and ribbon and so on. And that's kind of a throwback to the Sámi dwaji. And Sámi dwaji are the handicrafts that are done. And the word means something useful that's made beautiful. Because the Sámi, as nomadic people, carried their beautiful objects with them on the trail, so to speak. And these photographs are also very mobile. So I can roll up a whole bundle of them, and as I did not too long ago, sent them to Norway to be in an exhibit there, and they rolled up in a little bundle, and were exhibited in Tromsø in Norway. So, and also a nod to the fact that women use textiles and fabric. And you'll see that in all of our work. And so I thought the fact that they're printed on silk as a textile adds another layer of meaning. And then they're held up with sticks gleaned from the North Shore. With a little bit of beads embellishment. We have to, as Wendy said, we have to embellish a little bit, and we all do. So, so my contribution is a little bit more a contemporary thing. It's not necessarily the traditional way of looking at things, maybe, but we have to bring these things into a modern age also. And so I'm doing that with a digital camera and my computer. So this is another way of creating Sámi dwaji. So I'm going to turn this back to Laurel, I guess. All
right. Well, as Marlene was saying, the Sámi people live in the northern parts of what is now Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And so something that happened when we were doing this exhibit, and all of us artists have interconnected relationships. We've been friends for a long time. And we found common themes among our Nordic heritage and Ojibwe heritage and Sámi heritage. And so what you'll see in this room is something that these cultures have in common. And one is leading with our hearts, of course, is family. And the treasure that people have in their children, especially in a harsh environment. The survival of children is a precious, precious thing, and the anticipation of family and caring for them, whether we're the aunts or the uncles or whoever we are, this heritage of family. So the Sámi, like many people, wanted to protect their children, and so, like other peoples, they had a cradle board. And for the cradle board, there are things that are very practical, like a carrying strap and wraps to keep them from falling out and snug so they're happy. But they also you could put a plain rope on there, right? That would save time when you're a busy person. But we humans don't do that. We don't want just what's simple in life. We want to invent, and we want to create, and we want to have meaning. And so what Sámi people do, they're nomadic, and so they might love to make things on a large loom, and now they do. But when you're traveling all the time, you want something that you can just keep with you all the time. And so they made the bands with beautiful different colors, and into the bands they would weave all kinds of good wishes and thoughts for a good long life and for protection against danger into these bands. And so that's the band weaving, and Wendy will tell you a little bit later about its counterpart in this part of the world. But over here, and if you can't see what we're showing because of our magical thing here, we artists will be floating around, so you can ask us questions, and what you don't get to see now, you can go back and see now. So hopefully you can hear me, and then if you don't get to see it, pop back later. So over here, what my story is, I just like to make things. I'm an artist. And my children are Ojibwe from the Fond du Lac Reservation, and they were growing up and wanted powwow regalia, and I thought, well, I could help with the moccasins and this and that. But then I saw these beautiful woven belts. And so I thought, I could learn how to do that. So I learned how to do that. They didn't have YouTube then, so it was the library and looking at old things from the Historical Society. So I made them some woven belts that actually the Ho-Chunk have actually mastered that too. And so I learned how to make those belts. And then when I went to the Sámi Center, I saw that there were belts there, or bands there, that had these gorgeous patterns in them. And I went, now I need to learn how to do that. And so I started learning how to do that as well. And what I learned was that what I learned about the finger weaving belts is, the native people here did finger weaving. You know who else does finger weaving? My Norwegian ancestors made their garters finger weaving, same technique. You know who else does it? The Sámi, especially the South Sámi. They do finger weaving to embellish all of their things. And so it's wonderful. It's people, different parts of the world, figure out a solution with slightly different variations, which is what's really intriguing, is the little variations. So then I saw the band weaving, which requires very simple equipment. Some people just do the heddles with strings, but otherwise it's a little heddle. The oldest heddles they've found, heddles made out of reindeer bone, over 1,000 years old, up in Sámi. So little reindeer bone heddles, a little shuttle, and and now they have these fancy band locks that, anything will work. I made some out of blocks, right? And this is all that you need to create. And wool, there were wonderful sheep and beautiful natural things to use for dyes. So then I thought, these patterns are so wonderful, these Sámi patterns. Guess who else does band weaving? All the Baltic peoples. my Norwegian ancestors did band weaving. In fact, I serendipitously met a third cousin at the Nordic Museum in Seattle, and she has a picture of our great-grandma wearing the tin belt. And I thought, oh, I want to make that belt. And so I contacted people over there, and they were wonderful and told me what colors the black and white photo should be. And so continue that journey. So this piece just shows, and there's a birch bark heart because all these peoples have birch, and it's very important. But this just shows how the finger weaving, that's my Ojibwe children and grandchildren, and the Sámi and the Norwegian. All these different peoples have ways that interweave in our real lives, because this is us, and in the cultural life all of us get to enjoy. So thanks.
All right, if you turn and you look at this wall, one of the other things I was thinking about when Alison and I were doing this, and we have written a little book, was what do they all have in common? And every culture swaddled their babies because babies were so precious and they wanted it to remain beautiful. So I started doing what's called a moss bag, and people look at it and they go, what do you mean a moss bag? Well, it's called a moss bag because they use sphagnum moss for diapers. That's what they would put inside these little moss bags. And then when I was doing the research on the Sámi part, guess what? The Sámi did the same thing. And if you look geographically, they have pretty much the same climate and the same things that we have. So these are these moss bags. And the top moss bag was the first one that I did, and my actual little great niece was in that bag in a beaded, in a cradle board. The one on the bottom, I think I did for this exhibition, some red velvet. It was really difficult working on. Those have actually gold beads. Why wouldn't you want to sew with real gold beads, right? And I have bead addiction. That's why I'm broke. And we used to walk around and I'd say, God, if I had $100, I'd buy beads. So that's the one that I did for that. And then this large one is a historical piece. I had got my first moss bag from a dear friend, Wendy, and you can read about that. My son is now going to be 51. So this is an old pattern from Fond du Lac, the big black one on the wall, that she got from her mother. So that pattern is about 100 years old, and it's still being used. And then these moss bags were put in these cradle boards. And this has real silver beads on, because why wouldn't you have silver, do silver beads? And I had knee surgery, and it was a nightmare. And so to keep myself from screaming, I sat and sewed all of this during the nightmare. And these are the cradle boards that I've made. And this first one here that's blank, I made with Laurie's son, Tom. Yep. Tom does these workshops. And you don't ever want to go in the woods with Tom, because you'll be cutting down trees and carrying them back. And yes, we cut down those trees, a black ash tree, to make the row bar and the U on the bottom that holds the baby. And we planed those. And we had to make what's called jigs. If you're a woodworker, you make jigs. And then steam. You have to steam them, and you have like 2 minutes to bend everything. So we actually did that from scratch. And the other one I did with another man, I think he has now passed. He kind of did like more of a kit, and his design was to do this beaded bag that's attached there, and that the image on that one is supposed to be a butterfly, because there's a legend about what was some of the first toys that the Ojibwe people were given, and you're not supposed to tell stories when there's not snow on the ground. But anyway, that was the first toy that was given by someone to the children to play with, was butterflies. So you usually associate children with butterflies. And wasn't Lorraine gonna? I think you were going to do a brief one.
Thanks, Wendy. Well, and if you're curious about the Nordic groups, the Norwegians and Swedish, for example, we've got a few pieces from Vesterheim's collection and borrowed from the American Swedish Institute to show you what swaddled babies could go into. Some of these beautifully embellished bags, or pose, and also lots of caps. So you'll get a chance to see that. These tended to be just for baptism, and really special to show how people, it's almost universal that we want to celebrate babies, honor them, and give them the very best.
We're in our Sámi corner, and on that wall is my nephew, Sky, in a Sámi gakti from Arctic Norway that I borrowed from the Sámi Center, from Marlene. And it's a miracle he stood still for 1 second, because I have to paint from life, and then I take a photo, but I needed to capture it from life. And for all of you Norwegians in the crowd, you probably recognize the 8-pointed star. And remember when Annemor Sonbu was here, gave a webinar, she talked about the symbolic 8-pointed star has power. If you repeat it, it has more power. So look at how many times that star is repeated. There's a lot of power. And that was a bell pull that I got from a secondhand shop in Norway. You know, you can find these beautiful textiles in piles on the floor. Well, now people know they're worth something. But for a while, you could buy these beautiful handmade bell pulls. If you look closely, you'll see how I don't do, I'm sorry to tell you, actual weavings or embroideries. I paint it. So my brushstroke is like a needle. Each repetitive motion feels like I'm being part of that tradition and honoring those ancestors, because we have the Arctic Norwegian ancestors in our family. And then we turn over here and we see my friend Karin Hilja, who sat for me many, many years ago. And yes, she has those Sámi tattoos. 3,000-year-old images, pictographs from Alta. She's got all sorts of symbolic meanings. And then on the edges are those reindeer bone spoons, if you know those. And then behind you here, looking at my daughter Linnea, I realized as you were speaking, Laurel, that shape over her head, there's a little heart, but there's that little zigzag, that was from a bone heddle because of our Sámi heritage. And then the other patterns are from Sweden. And those of you that go to IKEA may recognize the star behind her, that 8-pointed star, was a Christmas tree skirt that I got and traced and added. So it's old and it's new all together. And then the cheese mold. And you probably have chip carvers here. You make those beautiful patterns. And in Norway, there were often those molds were carved with the wheel, the solar wheel, or patterns, as I was told, that will actually keep, it was thought that the cheese would not spoil or that butter would not spoil if you carved it. So now it is my Nordic mandala with designs from Skåne, southern Sweden around it. More patterns, we could go on and on and on, but you've been standing for a long time. But Wendy, you didn't say anything about your paintings of the beautiful.
Okay, what I do contemporary, when I'm not sewing, is these small paintings over here, and those are old designs of beadwork patterns that I've incorporated onto birch board, and it's kind of fun to I do a lot of historical research, and then of course I'm always into hearts. That's just something I've been doing all of my time. So that's how I contemporary do those. So I hope you've enjoyed yourself. If you've got questions, concerns. Anything good for the cause. Thank you. Do you want to close out? She's got to close out with.
Before we break up and give you the opportunity to talk to the artists individually, are there any questions for the artists? Oh, the caps over here, that's another part of the baptismal tradition in Norway and Sweden. And since babies were baptized usually within a week, if ideally, to protect them, the caps are very, very small, but added onto so many of them are these beautiful details, maybe some special fabric or special ribbon, some metal lace or bead trim. You'll see some similarities between other cultural groups there with the use of beads and ribbons, and motifs that were believed to protect the child, like the 8-petal flower and the cross, the even-sided cross that's on one of the caps. Well, I know you actually have them, so I'll let you ask them individually of the artists. Again, thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you, too, especially for our sponsorship by the Saui family in loving memory of Floy Anderson Saui. Let's thank them. Please keep an eye on the Vesterheim website for more information. We're going to have a webinar on January 12th with as many of the participating artists as possible, and there may be some additional programming, so keep an eye on the Vesterheim website. So again, thank you to the guest curators, the participating artists for sharing your work and your traditions and your story with us. Thank you everyone for coming.